Hello, I'm Daniel Walshaw with the Columbus Symphony, and we are here with our music director today, Rasa Milanov, to talk about our fourth Masterworks concert of the 1920 Masterworks season, which features music by Mendelssohn, Chopin, and Edward Elgar, in a concert that also has a great pianist on it, Fei Fei. So welcome, Rasa.
Thank you, Daniel. It's always a pleasure to have the opportunity to address our audience and be able to give them a little bit of a preview before they come to the concert at the Ohio Theater.
Great. So this is this concert, yes, at the Ohio Theater is the last Masterworks concert in the fall. So it's not to be missed before we go into Nutcracker and Holiday Pops and all sorts of great things. It's November 15th and 16th at the Ohio Theater. So let's jump right in. What is this program about? What's the design of this program?
As all the programs that we present here at the Columbus Symphony, I try to curate a special experience for each one of the concerts. So it always features some of my favorite music, some of the soloists that I would like to bring to Columbus, some names that we perhaps have never heard here in our town that I think would have a spectacular career in very near future. And in this case, it's going to be a concert of discoveries. And as the title of the main piece of the concert program suggests, Enigma Variations, there will be quite a bit of detective work that we're going to be doing throughout the concert of figuring out certain things, whether there are any themes that move from one piece to the other, what is the general mood of the music that we are going to present, particularly on the first half of the concert. It would be good to, for instance, on the first half of the concert, to discover how closely are written to each other, both the overture and the Chopin Piano Concerto, literally within 2 years.
Wow.
And within 5 years of the death of one of the greatest composers, Ludwig van Beethoven. And when you listen to this music, you normally assume that it's much later, much more separated from that classical time. And on the other side of the program, Enigma Variations, it's right on the cusp of 19th to the 20th century, 1899. And this is a piece that single-handedly crowned Elgar as the most important British composer of the time and earned him a knighthood in 1904. And so it's an interesting combination of pieces that all very romantic, all very beautiful and powerful, and something that we have not done in a long time. And I'm really excited to bring that to Columbus.
So how do we start? We start with this Mendelssohn Calm Sea and Prosperous Voyage. It's an overture type
Yeah, it is
work.
an overture which is based on two famous poems by Goethe, the famous German poet and philosopher. And Mendelssohn is not the first composer that took those poems, actually. The person that I mentioned earlier, Beethoven, also wrote a work that in which he actually uses the text of these poems. And in a nutshell, there are two separate poems. The first one is called Calm Sea, the second one is called Prosperous Voyage. And all of this is, of course, happening before the age of steam travel. So for a sailor that is out of the sea, the worst thing is to have no wind, because you could not really go anywhere.
Right.
And Prosperous Voyage is sort of the other side of the coin, when suddenly that stillness, the wind appears, and the voyager arrives at his destination. So this was something very descriptive, of course, and those two poems were so popular at the time that Mendelssohn put it as a title, but he didn't feel like he needed to list the poems themselves in the program, because he assumed that people would know that. But as you could tell, you have a little bit more serene opening part of the overture corresponding to the Calm Sea, and then you have a little bit more motion and direction and perhaps triumphant fanfares at the end of the second part of the overture. So it pretty much follows the program of these poems.
And then we welcome a young pianist, Fei Fei, to perform one of Chopin's first piano concerto. Chopin, not a prolific orchestral composer, but like Paganini, wrote some brilliant concertos for his instrument, piano and orchestra.
Yeah, it is interesting that at the beginning of the 19th century, it's sort of the era of the virtuosos. That for first time, before that was perhaps a little bit more of an exception, but then it became very important for the person that performs on stage to be also the composer. And in the case of Chopin and Paganini, as you mentioned, and Liszt and many other virtuosos that was quite popular during the 19th century, that romantic expression of the artist being there, lonely, fighting the elements, fighting the instruments, and delivering something of almost supernatural ability was something very important for that entire era. And it all starts with someone like Chopin. He was only 20 years old when he wrote this piece, so it's almost unimaginable of a piece of that proportion and of that beauty and that almost revolutionary change of what was before and what suddenly happened in this piece is something extraordinary to be aware of. And the other important thing is that pretty much throughout the classical period, the music was centered in Central Europe, in Vienna or in Italy or these neighboring countries, and each one of them sort of had established an international style of writing music, which was not that much distinguishable.
Right.
And suddenly, as the 19th century came, a lot of the smaller countries tried to use their folklore traditions to find their own language and identity in the way they write music. And Chopin was certainly the person that represented Poland to an extent that, he's one of the most recognizable names in Poland even nowadays. Even the airport in Warsaw is named after him. Can you imagine an airport in the United States to be named after a composer?
No, I could not.
I could not. So it's extraordinary. He's absolutely revered in Poland, and he left an enormous amount of beautiful music, most of it, of course, for piano, his instrument, and certainly it's that 40-minute long concerto, which is extraordinary by any standards, is an incredible vehicle for a young soloist like Fei Fei, who is on the roster of the Young Concert Artists Fei Fei is on the roster of the
Concert
Artists Guild in New York City, and this organization really scouts for talent for people at the beginning stages of their careers, and I happen to be involved with their auditions regularly, and I've always come back after those auditions with a few names that I would like to present, she's one of those people that we discovered.
Absolutely. They always are promoting some of the best young talents, and it's wonderful to be able to bring them to Columbus. And so the Elgar's Enigma Variations, it's one of these pieces that everybody recognizes when they hear, but they don't know it.
They do because of one variation.
One variation gets
one
used
variation which is
in a lot
played
of stuff.
all the time, and both in pop culture and of course in more classical context.
But what
this
is
one
piece?
Of those pieces that it has such an interesting story, and has become one of the biggest challenges for the musicologists to figure out what exactly is that enigma. Because when Elgar composed it, they're kind of like two layers of the enigma. it's a theme with variations. So it starts with this beautiful theme, and as the theme repeats, it represents the character and the personality of his closest circle of friends. So what he did, he just put the initials on the top of each one of the variations, and at first that was like the first layer of the enigma, but you could pretty much figure out who these people are, particularly if you were around him at the time. Of course, he includes his wife, he includes some other romantic relationship people that he had, and there is one variation which just has 3 asterisks, because he didn't really want to reveal the identity of this person. Subsequently, it was revealed, but the enigma comes from the fact that he wrote to his publisher that actually there is a much larger and darker theme that goes over the entire piece, and this theme is never played. So it could not. He did not want to reveal what it is.
Okay.
So sort of like, as they say, you go to a theater and the whole play is about someone that never shows up on stage. So it's how do you figure out what that is? And so everybody knows about that enigma. They're aware of it, but nobody knows what exactly it is. And I think it's going to probably be one of the biggest mysteries that will never be solved in classical music. But the piece itself, of course, it's a masterpiece.